On a side note, guys, I did not intend to make this a two parts video, but I'm afraid I will have to do so because when I recorded the video, it was like 45 minutes long. So it will either be a two-part series or a three-part series. I hope, guys, you understand. And yeah, have fun. All right, hi guys. So in today's video, we are going to see how to make a mobile keyboard like this one. So it's a simple one, but you can use it to make games like Wordle or something like that. All right, let's get right into it. So first off, let's create a new 2D project. So new 2D mobile keyboard, maybe let's name it, hit enter. All right, once the project is loaded up, the first thing we want to do is to set our target platform to Android as usual. Nice. Once it's loaded up, let me just check the roadmap here. So we've seen the final result. We've created a new 2D project. Now we are going to configure our canvas scaler. So in the hierarchy, right click, select UI and create a new canvas. So let's name it canvas. And here, instead of setting the UI scale mode to scale with screen size, we are going to set constant pixel size. So this will help us configure our UI by code more precisely. All right, perfect. So next, we want to create our keyboard rect. So just right click on the canvas again, create UI and image. So this image will contain the keyboard. So let's call it keyboard. All right, perfect. Now we're going to create a new script. So let's create a new folder first, scripts, and let's create a keyboard script. Nice. Let's drag and drop it onto the keyboard here, and let's open it. Okay, perfect. So first off, we want a reference to our keyboard rect transform. So let's set serialize field private rect transform. Rect transform, let's call it. All right, perfect. Let's specify it here in the inspector. So let's grab the rect transform and drop it here. Nice. Next, let's convert the start method into an enumerator because when dealing with the UI, return null. When dealing with the UI, it's better to wait one frame for the canvas to scale with the phone's physical size. All right, then we want to say rect transform dot size delta equals new vector 2. Let's configure the width of the keyboard to the width of the screen, and the height, let's say screen dot height divided by 2. It's just a test first, just to see if this works properly. So let's hit play. Nice, we've got it. So the width is the full width of the phone. You can see that by double clicking on the keyboard in the hierarchy. And the height is half the height of the phone. Nice. So now we are going to set some quick settings to be able to configure our keyboard container better. So that's private, maybe float. It's going to be the width percent if you don't want your keyboard to take the full width of the phone. Then we want to have a height percent. And we also need an offset from the bottom of the screen. So let's say bottom offset. Just to have a better control over these, we are going to add the range attributes to all of these. So for this, it's going to be 0 to 1. Yeah. Same thing for the height percent. And for the bottom offset, let's go for something more convenient, maybe from 0 to 0.5. All right. Let's check if it's working. Nice. 0 to 1, 0 to 1, 0 to 0.5. All right. Now let's use these values, this data, to configure our rect transform. So let's create a method here called update rect transform. All right, perfect. And the first thing we want to do is to call it here. Yeah, and we are also going to call it in the update method. All right, so we can remove this here or just comment it, because now we know how to configure the size of the rect transform. So we are going to say that the width of our container is going to be equals to the width % times the screen.width. All right, same thing. Oh, sorry, width, typo. The height of the keyboard container is going to be equals to height % times screen.height. And for the button offset, we're going to configure it later. So let's just say now that the rect transform.size delta equals new vector 2 with the width and height. All right, so here we are configuring the size of the keyboard container. Perfect. Let's now configure the bottom offset. Okay, cool. So we can say that let's create a new vector 2 called position. And this will be the position of our rect transform. So let's say position.x equals screen.width, because we want our keyboard container to be at the center of the screen, on the x-axis at least. And the position.y is going to be the bottom offset times the height of the screen plus the height of the rectangle, so the height of the rect transform, divided by 2. So now let's assign this position to our rect transform. So rect transform.position equals position. All right, let's try this out. Let's hit play. Okay, so now you can see that the width is working properly, the height is working properly too, and the bottom offset too. But we have an issue here. The issue is that the rectangle is not positioned well on the x-axis. Sorry, here I forgot to divide by 2 the width of the screen, because we want the rect transform to be at the center on the x-axis. All right, let's now hit play. Perfect. All right, guys. Now we've got something. Okay, cool. Now we can configure the position of our keyboard correctly. All right. So let's save this data, copy component here. All right, let's pass the component values. Let's hit play again. Cool, it's working. All right, now we want to create a key prefab. So let's create in our canvas a new button. Okay, so this button, we are going to rename it key. Okay, cool. And now we want just to change the width and the height of the button, just some random values for now, because we're going to configure that by code again to fit our keyboard. Let's change the text here to maybe the letter Q. Let's tick the best fit option and maybe scale this up. All right, cool. So now we have our key. Okay, perfect. So let's create a key script that we are going to be using later. So let's create a new script and call it key. Okay, so let's assign it to our key and let's create a prefab of our key. Oh, sorry. I think it's, yeah, I should have renamed it prefabs, because we are going to have not a lot of prefabs, but I prefer. All right. So in our key script, let's open it. We want to have the option to modify the text assigned to our key, so the letter. So let's create a new elements header for our text, key text. Yeah. So now we have to add the UnityEngine.UI library for the text to be recognized. So let's add it right now. All right, perfect. Then we will need a method, public void set key maybe, which will take a char as an argument. So let's call it key. And then we can say keyText.text equals key.toString to configure our key. All right, maybe let's store this data too, because we might use it later. So let's say private char key. This.key equals key. Okay, perfect. We also want a reference to our button, so maybe let's add a new method to get the button, because we're going to add the listener later. We are going to configure this key callback from our keyboard later. So let's say return, oh, it's not void, it should return a button here. Sorry. Get component button. All right, cool. We can remove the start and update method here. We won't use them. Let's go back here. Let's drag and drop the text here to our text in the inspector. All right, and let's apply these changes to the prefab. Nice. Now we can remove the key from here. Okay, so next thing we want to do now is to create the keyboard line struct. So how are we going to proceed for the keyboard lines? Let me show you. So here we have our keyboard rectangle with the width, the height, its height, and the offset from the bottom. We want to divide the keyboard container into 3 lines. So each line will have a different amount of keys. And then we are going to configure or create by code our buttons, key buttons, and then configure them. So if we have one button, we want it to be at the center. So the start X is going to be 0 and we place it. If we have 2 buttons, so Q and W, we want them to be at the center too. So we are going to start from half the width of the key. If we have 3 buttons, we want to start at half the width of the key minus the width of the key. So the general formula for placing the buttons will be this one. And this is what we are going to be using. All right. So now let's create a little structure. Let's use the system.serializable attribute to show it in the inspector. And let's make it public, struct keyboard line. Okay, so the keyboard line will simply hold a string. So I say public string keys. All right, so let's create it here. Let's create a new header for that. Keyboard lines, serialized field, keyboard line. Let's create an array of it. And let's call it lines simply. Yeah, cool. All right, so here in the inspector, we can configure our keyboard lines. So we will have 3 lines. So the first line will have QWERTY UIOP. The second line will have ASDFGHJKL. And the third line finally ZXCVBNM. All right, we now have all of our keys set up. All of our lines set up, sorry. So let's see what we can do with them. So now we want to add a new method to create our keys. So let's say private void create keys. Okay, cool. So for each line, we are going to create some keys for this line. So let's loop through all of the keys. So let's create another loop with the J index now. And we're going to loop through lines i.keys.length. We can consider the string as a chain of characters. That's why we can use length here. It's going to return the length of the string. Thus the amount of characters the string holds. All right. We can say char key equals lines i.keys.j. So this is the key of the line we are checking now. And let's create a new key. So key instance equals instantiate something under this rect transform. Okay, so this something should be the key prefab. So let's add it. Let's add it under elements maybe. So let's create key prefab. All right, cool. So let's rename this dots to key prefab. And now we have our key instance. Next, we want to configure our key. So key instance dot set key key. Now this will configure the key. So let's create this method here at start. All right. So we are not placing the buttons right now. All of the buttons will be one on top of the other. So, okay, let's grab our key here, drag and drop it here. Let's hit play. Okay, so we have the M letter and all of these keys here. Okay, let me Q, M, N, B, V. We indeed have our keys. Okay, I won't take all of them. So let's now try and place them correctly. So let's now create a new method called place keys. So private void place keys. This will allow us to place our keys, and we will call it in the update method after updating the rect transform place keys. So note that we are calling these functions here in the update method just because we want to constantly update them. But in your game, you will just call it from the start method just once, because the resolution of your phone or all the settings won't be changed at runtime. Okay, so first let's make a new variable for our line count. So it's just the length of our lines. All right, cool. Let's configure the line height. So let's say float line height equals, this will be the height of our keyboard. So let's say rect transform.rect.height divided by 3, but let's just say, to make it more generic, lines.count, so line count. All right, so now we have the height of our line. Next, we want to specify the width of the key. So let's say key width is going to be line height times some value that we will use to scale our key properly. So now we are setting the key width to the line height for it not to overlap some other keys or go outside of the line bounds. So let's say here key to line ratio maybe. Okay, so let's create it. Let's create a new header for that. So key settings. Let's create a new float for key to line ratio, and let's add the range attribute because it shouldn't be bigger than the line. So from 0 to 1. All right, perfect. Then we want to add some spacing too. So let's say x spacing equals, let's create a new variable for that too. So key spacing times line height. Okay, it has to be proportional to the height of the line too. So let's create our serialize field, private float key x spacing, and again let's add our wonderful range attribute. All right, perfect. Then we want to keep track of the current key index. So let's say current key index equals 0, because we're going to have some nested loops and it can be difficult to keep track of them. So let's say for each lines, so let's say line count now. All right, we're going to say here, if you remember, we want to keep track of our key count divided by 2. So let's create a variable for that. So let's say float half key count for that line equals the lines I dot keys dot length divided by 2. But here this one is an integer, so let's convert that into a float to avoid some rounding issues. Then we can specify our start x position. So this will be equals to the rect transform position dot x, so it's the center of the keyboard, minus our key width times the half key count plus our key width divided by 2. So that's the formula we used here. We've just added the rect transform dot position just to center them. All right, now we want to loop through all of our keys. So let's say lines I, let's create a new loop, sorry, keys.length. And we're going to say, oh, here we can add the line Y here. Sorry, that's the Y position of the line. So the Y position of the line is going to be the position of the rect transform plus its height divided by 2. So now we are at the top of the rect transform of the keyboard, sorry, minus the line height divided by 2 minus the index of the line times the line height. So this small formula allows us to go down for each line. So we are going to start our first line right here. Then we are going to go here for I equals 1, and then here for I equals 2. All right, cool. All right, let's determine now the X position of the key. So let's say key X. Okay, so it's going to be equals to our start X plus the index J times the key width. Okay, perfect. So let's create a new position for the key. So let's call it key position equals new vector 2. So it's going to be key X and line Y. Okay, so all right, let's assign it now. So we can say that our key, or maybe let's just get the rect transform of our key rect transform equals rect transform dot get child current key index. All right, dot get component, sorry, get component rect transform. And then we can increase the value of our current index to go to the next key and so on. So let's place it, key rect transform dot position equals key position. All right, let's set the width and the height of the key too, because we forgot to do that. So let's say key rect transform dot size delta equals new vector 2. I think we have key width here and key width. Oh, sorry, key width. All right, now we should be good actually. So let's try it and hope that it works. Okay, just a quick fix here. So we want to create our keys before waiting one frame. Otherwise, we're going to place the keys before creating them. So this will lead to an error. All right, let's try it out. So now key to line ratio. Set the key to line ratio to 1 for the keys to be visible and the key spacing to 0. That's not an issue for now. We're going to use that later. All right, we can see that we have the keys now. All right, let's diminish their size, and it's pretty much cool. Right now, it's already really nice. And they fit to the rectangle, to the keyboard. All right, they scale with it. Let's make them bigger. And let's add our spacing now.